Hello, and welcome back to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo. And today, this is a really impactful, jam-packed episode. And I wanted to just share some thoughts on what living fully and intentionally after a loss means today. This has been on my mind a lot lately, and I think it's important to just come on here and explain what this means and what this looks like and feels like, especially after we go through the death of a loved one, especially, but really any kind of loss, because we can feel very lost and confused and without a lot of direction after we go through something devastating. So we're getting right into it here. So your gain from this episode today is to understand some fundamentals of grief. We're going to kind of start there. And why this is such a complex thing to wrap our heads around when we lose someone, especially. But we'll also transition in this episode to talking about okay, we've lost this person or people, or we've been through this divorce or whatever it is. How do we go on? How do we do this in a full, happy, intentional, beautiful way that honors both ourselves, mostly ourselves, and them? That is the premise of this whole episode. And moreover, not just how to do this, but why it's so important. The why behind anything that we do is our driving force for change and for a better life. So addressing that is equally as important as the how. How do we get there? But especially with the holidays coming up, what better time to really pause and sit and think about this, right? To ponder how we want to end this year, process everything that has happened to us this year, perhaps, and look ahead to next year. Or maybe you don't feel ready for any of that and just want the holidays to be over. I feel that too. I've been there. But if that's kind of where you are, or that's where you're leaning, just hear me out on this today and stick with me through this, because this is an insanely important mindset shift that I know is going to help you along your journey. But before we dig into how to live this full, incredible, vibrant life after loss that I'm always going on about, I think it's important to first address how we as humans process grief for a moment. And this is going to be pretty high level, but I think this is important to say, because to be able to even see and feel and experience and live this amazing life that we have ahead of us after loss, we have to comprehend what we've been through a little bit and give ourselves permission to do that. And when I first started educating myself on how the brain grieves, so not just my emotions, not just what I was feeling, but literally what is scientifically going on in our brain when a loss occurs, it was kind of life-changing. It helped me to understand a lot of things, but really just how we are attached to the thing or the person that we've lost, why we grieve it the way that we do, why it's difficult to accept and understand. And again, I always use accept very loosely here, but just coming to some resignation of okay, this loss has happened to me, and why it can take so much time to feel like we can move forward. Do any of those things resonate with you a little bit? So grief is an especially painful problem for the brain to solve. So again, let's focus on the brain here for a moment. When you experience a loss, your brain now has to learn to live in a world with the absence of someone or something, maybe a relationship, a friendship, whatever, that you loved so deeply. Someone or something that is or was so ingrained in your understanding and your experiences in this world. And we all have sort of a brain map, is what you could kind of call it, that we all live with. And when someone we love dies, let's just use a death as an example. When someone we love dies, or when we go through any kind of loss, especially a very sudden one, we need to get used to it. That loss, it messes up our brain map quite significantly. And when this happens, the brain is trying to piece it all together for you. It means that for your brain, your loved one is simultaneously gone but also kind of like everlasting in the fibers of our brain. And you're sort of walking through two worlds at the same time. Can you relate to feeling that way at all? I know when that was first explained to me, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how this feels. And that brain map that I just mentioned, we use that to find our loved ones, in theory. Maybe not physically, but we can actually. This is where we make these connections to the people that we love. It enables us to predict where they are and have the ability to search for them when they're gone. The problem with grief is that there's this mismatch between the virtual map that we always use to find them and our reality. This reality that after they die, they can no longer be found in the dimensions of time and space as we know it. There's this situation where they're not on the map at all. And the alarm and confusion that this causes is one of the reasons that grief can really overwhelm us. We kind of go into this panic mode because our brain is like experiencing two different things here. But the brain is a wildly sophisticated tool that is simply doing its best to catch up with the grief that you're feeling, with this new reality. But it has to relearn some things. We have to give it time to get there. And we have to give ourselves grace because we're each unique and there's really no time frame on this. Often it's very gradual. And I say it all the time, it ebbs and flows. We might be doing okay for a period of time and then we might get triggered by something or a big life event happens and it all comes to the surface once again. It's like having the same routine each day. We get used to that. But then almost on a dime, it's completely upended. Like that would throw any of us off, right? So after a loss, this realization that we're having, like, oh my God, my loved one is no longer waking up next to me in bed every morning or whatever this looks like for you, that happens over and over and over again, right? And our brain is now relearning this new routine, these new patterns. This is grief. It's these countless small realizations that the brain has to process. And this truth that we're experiencing over and over and over again, which is very painful, that can bring a fresh wave of grief constantly. So I know that was a bit of a sciencey lesson there for a second, but I think it's important to set us up for what we're ultimately talking about today, because so often in grief support, the psychological side, like, I mean, maybe unless you're in therapy or counseling, I don't know admittedly in detail what that might look like, but at least in the grief space, and it's certainly what I see on social media and things, like that's not talked about a lot, at least not enough from what I've seen out there. But these are the types of things that absolutely changed the way I view my grief, because it gave me permission to understand those darker days. It gave me permission to know that there was more going on beyond the surface that I perhaps wasn't even aware of. And that this shock and disturbance I was feeling associated with the deaths of my parents and dog were actually way more complex than I gave my body and mind credit for. That this needed to be felt and coped with. I couldn't ignore it because it was my brain physically trying to relearn and rewire itself. It's actually a really incredible process, but bottom line, we have to allow it to do that. We have to give our grief time because our brain has to do its thing, and that takes a hot minute. So I want you to remember here, your body carries wisdom that your mind does not. So just because you might not feel ready, either your mind just isn't there, or maybe like you literally feel this in your body, you're just like, I am not ready, or that's what we're telling ourselves. Just because you might feel like you'll never be the same, and to some extent that's absolutely correct. You will never really be the same person after going through loss, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing though. And that also doesn't mean that happiness and joy and fulfillment aren't out there for you and that these things won't get better. It's actually quite the opposite. And I hope everything I've just explained at a very high level, you've realized that we can actively choose to live in states of sadness, overwhelm, anxiety, stress, suffering. We might not think it's a choice at the time. And you know what? Early on, it might not be. But eventually, when it's not properly dealt with and coped with or ignored, that is ultimately a choice. And for me personally, there came a point in my journey around 1.5 years after my dad died that I really realized this in a big way. And I was kind of like my own first student here. The people I coach now, I used to be where they are, right? Navigating parent loss and pet loss. And that recovery period, if you will, again, I use that term loosely as well. But I strengthened my emotional and physical and spiritual connection to myself and others around me one day at a time, one moment at a time. And I developed methods to create a life greater than I could have imagined. And this is something I am still working on. I still have goals here. I still have things I want to do and these big, amazing things that I want to feel and experience in my lifetime. And you can too. Perhaps there's no clear path forward without who you've lost. Maybe there is zero light at the end of the tunnel for you right now. Maybe you can't even find the tunnel. Maybe you are just simply existing, but you're not really living because it's just too hard. It's too painful, or you simply don't want to. Maybe life has just completely lost its luster. But I've said this in my community before. You have a responsibility to live your life as meaningfully and as intentionally as possible after loss. And my true joy and my purpose in life that I have come to realize is helping you get there. But you need to want that too. And you have to want that really intentionally. And I love that word for that reason. That's like my word of the year this year is intentional and intentionality. To see that value that this mindset can bring to your life. And not just bring it to your life, but it can change your life. So to bring this full circle and back to how I define living fully and happily and intentionally, you might be like, okay, Tara, what does that really look like? What does that really mean? It really comes down to living our truest, most authentic, joyful, content, complete self with your grief as your ally instead of your enemy. That's how I personally see it. But I would actually love for you to take a moment and actually define what that means for you too. Maybe even journal about this for a moment. What do you envision for yourself? How do you see the rest of your life playing out? Now, this can feel like a huge thing to think about depending on where you are in your grief. I want to acknowledge that. But I also want to challenge you, get a little uncomfortable. Take the step to think about that today. Because how I've defined this full, happy, intentional living, I know can feel like a massive undertaking when we've lost someone or multiple people, and especially if we're very early on from that. This might not feel like it's in the cards. Or there's resistance because we don't feel worthy, or we feel guilt for moving on, or we've just totally lost ourselves somehow. Life can feel meaningless and hopeless. Like I could go on. I know these feelings. And there were a lot of things that I put into practice to get myself to this phase of my life, because I can confidently tell you, I am there. I wasn't always there though. And that's just what I want to encourage you today, that it is so possible for you. And I have my grief moments, as we all do, as we all always will. But someone asked me recently, and this was a really enlightening question. They asked, how are you really doing with your grief right now? And it actually caught me off guard, I'll be honest. And I actually felt a touch of guilt at first. Because my gut reaction, my intuition was like, I am doing really, really freaking well. And that is not to rub this in anyone's face here, okay? Again, I've been in those dark nights of the soul. I have been underwater. I was not always here. But I put in the work to get here. And for a second, I even laughed. I was like, wow, when and how did this happen? Like, how can I feel so enlightened, so at peace, so fulfilled, so joyful. Yet I don't have my parents, my lifelines here with me. Now, that's not to say I don't have my moments where I feel my life could be even more fulfilled and joyful and enlightened with them here. I know it would be. And that is pretty sad and also pretty trippy to think about, because I wonder sometimes, like, how am I really so okay in my day-to-day life without my parents? Like, what? In what world? Like, if I'm doing this well right now, imagine how much better it would be if they were actually here. That's a hard pill to swallow, right? And you might be able to relate to that feeling. But the point is, I did manage to get myself to a place of that serenity, if you will, that I mentioned earlier. It's not full acceptance, but it is this serenity and this calm with what is in my life, with simply being. And some I didn't even realize I was doing at the time, these things to get myself to this place. And I'll quickly just share a few things that were helpful for me here. I actually shared this on social media the other day as well in a little bit more detail, but just for the sake of time today. But to become the person that we want to become, we have to intentionally act like the person we want to become. We can't just think about it and hopefully that it manifests and whatever. We do have to put in a little bit of work here. So I wanted to become a grateful, self-aware, fulfilled, magnetic, happy person in my grief, with my grief. That's what I wanted for myself. And this can look different for everyone. So again, I encourage you, think about what this really looks like for you. One thing I did is I self-reflected big time. I asked myself some hard questions, kind of like what I was alluding to earlier. What do I really want my life to look like now? What is really calling me? What work do I really want to be doing? And it's not about like just the job, just like what feeds my soul? Questions like that. I got creative. And remember, creativity is so much more than just what we do. It's mental. It goes so much deeper. It's who you are. It's the essence of who you are. And I want to remind you, you are creative. You are the creator or the creatrix of your own life and your own story. So think about this for a second and maybe even write a couple things down. What could you create? How could you tap into this side of yourself and get to know this new version of you? Because like we said earlier, grief and loss, it does and it will change you. But it doesn't always have to be for the worst, right? We can make a choice of what road we want to go down. I got creative. I created Losses Become Gains. I started this blog. I started this podcast, all the things. I created a journal. I mean, when I tapped into it and I allowed myself to do that, it came spewing out of me. So think about what this might look like for you. Other things I did, I moved my body. I take daily walks like it's my day job. It's something I proudly got from my mom, I would say. But, you know, the physical and mental benefits, especially as we're grieving and we don't feel like leaving the couch, are massive. So I want to acknowledge that. So I just want you to think about this. Are you moving enough? Are you getting the juices going and the chi flowing throughout your mind and your body? What are you nourishing yourself with? Is it serving you and your highest, healthiest self? Another thing I did is I opened my throat chakra. I've learned a lot about the chakras this year. I was familiar with what they are. Now I'm really digging into it. But you know, for me, as much as I love blogging and I will always be a writer at heart, it's where I started Losses Become Gains. But my throat chakra was screaming at me for a place to thrive. And podcasting was the way that I did this. And podcasting has given me such life, you guys, such purpose. It has helped me tap into even more creativity. It has connected with me with the most incredible people. It is super fun. I love doing this. So again, I challenge you, get in touch with your body. What feels good to you? And feel out any blockages and ways to release these things that maybe aren't feeling good to you right now. There's plenty of help out there too with people that can help you do this if you're kind of not sure where to start, myself included. But it's so empowering when we do this. Another thing that also really nourished my mind and body was that I meditated. And I just want to quickly say here, remember, meditation isn't about turning off your mind. That's a huge misconception with meditation. It's one that I definitely thought was the point when I first started. But once I realized that it was more about allowing your thoughts to actually come in and go and letting them flow in and out and, releasing them ultimately, it took the pressure off, like a lot. And now I do it almost every day, and it is so healing. Lastly, just to finish up this list of a few things that I did to kind of kickstart my healing journey, I self-educated. I will be very transparent. I have never invested more in my own healing and my own self-growth and development in my entire life than I have in this past year. And I'm talking like outside of college here, okay? But in my case, from becoming a certified grief coach to going through a Speak with Soul course, to a money mindset mastermind, to becoming a soul purpose and spiritual life coach, to going through Digital Course Academy so I can bring you even more enhanced courses next year, hopefully. I've never invested more, and I've never been so happy. I have never felt so alive. I have never felt more inspired to learn and to grow and see what I could do with all of this, but doing it on and in my own way, right? Like I take in all of this information I get around me, but ultimately I'm listening to my own gut and intuition when I implement these things. And I have never felt more in touch with what I am meant to be doing here with my time and energy and soul in this lifetime. That has come about because of all of the things that I just mentioned at a very high level again, and an incredible number of really small, significant nuances in between. But no one forced me to do any of that. I want to make that clear. No one forced me to take the money out of my pocket or enter my credit card information to pay and invest in these things. Because for me, it wasn't even about the money. I knew the money would come. I knew I would figure out the money. I did it because it was about the transformation that I knew was possible, and I didn't want to miss out on it. Like I almost had like a little bit of FOMO on some of these things that I've invested in. My why was too important to ignore. All of this was too important for me not to explore, because I've come to realize I have so much life left to live, and I know that, and I feel that deeply. That came about because I listened to myself. That came about because I took a step back from my grief and I looked at my life and I realized a change needed to be made. It came because I wanted more for myself. My parents would have wanted more. They weren't going to accept me being stuck in this ho-hum life. And I was like, dang it, neither am I. I'm done. Things are changing right now. I am committing to something bigger right now. Here we go. So what does this look like for you? Are you seeking a deeper sense of purpose or fulfillment and joy in your life, but maybe your overwhelm and grief and loneliness or sadness, anxiety, or maybe even a multitude of other things are holding you back? Or maybe you feel like you're getting to that point where you want to find this deeper sense of purpose, but you kind of don't know where to start, or that feels intimidating. I've worked with people who are exactly where you are right now. And now they are living their life in abundance and alignment. They are not the same people they were when we first started working together, these one-on-one clients that I coach. Their testimonials can speak to this. I'm not here to share that today, but what I will say is as a coach, that lights me up more than I could possibly express to you. That is the point of all of this. The finality of a death and all that encompasses is heavy. It is hard to understand, yet it is so part of the human experience, yet so ignored still in our society. When I was in my 2 years of hell, as I like to call it, around the time my parents were, when their health was worsening, and then my dog died and all of these things, there were essentially 4 deaths that I had to try and comprehend. My dog, my mom, my dad, and my parents as a unit together. And actually almost like a 5th death, because then there was like the 3 of us, almost like the 4 of us really, as a family unit together. And that all being gone from my life. And there were countless little deaths on top of that. Loss of self and my identity, loss of myself as a daughter. I went through a breakup just weeks before my dad died, so I had to grapple with that too. And this was somebody, now ironically, this was my husband, but at the time, that was like, he basically said to me, like, I don't see you as the person that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, which I know is so ironic given the fact that we're married and now having a baby. But this is like the impact that loss and grief can have on our lives, right? It took the joy. It took everything I had from my relationship. I had to grieve that. A loss of belonging, extreme loneliness, and even though some of that was admittedly self-inflicted, but also a loss of guidance and direction that I would have gotten from my parents. Loss of my entire future without them. Loss of relationships, again, my romantic relationship, but also I think it's important to recognize like how we're able to relate to some people. We might lose some friends in this process, right? So think about how this looks for you. But like for me, I was mourning all of it. And these are just a few examples here. So, can you relate to any of this? Is there anything else coming up for you? I want to encourage you, think about how this looks in your life too. How many big, prominent deaths, and again, a death can be a divorce, a death can come in many different forms. I don't necessarily mean the death of a loved one here. But just thinking about this, how many big, prominent things have you lost? But then how many, I'm going to say smaller just for argument's sake, but how many little smaller deaths there have been as a result of this? And these all have to be dealt and coped with. They all deserve to be given the attention that they deserve. Because our brain has to process all of these. It has to process it almost all as a whole, but then individually as well. This is like what we were talking about in the beginning of the episode. So do you kind of see what I'm getting at here? This is why I started this episode with that all being said, with that mindset, because this is so important to understand. It's not just the initial loss that we're in the throes of grief for. It's that and everything else after that that can really trip us up. That is what can affect our day-to-day coping and living. That's why loss needs to be dealt with holistically, carefully, intentionally, and with not just the acute grief in mind, because it lasts a lifetime. New things will pop up. New things will come up that we grieve and re-grieve over and over. No one said this was easy. You will never hear me say this is easy, okay? It's a process. But hear me now and come back to me if you're distracted. This is important. It's a process, and it is the most important transformation and process of your entire life. But do this well, and you will open doors and windows and skylights to the heavens for yourself that you did not even know existed. You will untap more than you could have possibly even meant to. And I know this because I have done the work and that has happened. And this is not to say like, it happened to me so it can happen to you. I'm just saying I myself am living proof of this. The people I help, some clients, other groups, I know this has worked. Because we believe in it. And I continue to do the work. I continue to show up. I continue to educate myself and work on my healing and guide myself and others. And we can ultimately learn to guide ourselves too. We can all kind of unofficially become our own little grief coaches here. because I might not always be in your ear to tell you these things, right? Like on a day-to-day basis, we have to really help ourselves out of this hole that we find ourselves in. My clients, they continue to show up and do that. We're all in this together because we understand the importance. We show up, we take those baby steps, we put the work in little by little, and we uplift those around us, and we do the damn thing. Period. So if you are still not convinced that you need to discover a more full, happy, intentional life, or maybe you're feeling resistance or have limiting beliefs gnawing at you, let me ask you some very important questions here. What is it worth to you to stay stuck where you are? What is it worth to you to stay stuck in your grief? To be miserable, unfulfilled, lost, confused, overwhelmed, unsupported, just okay. What is a just okay life anyway? Who wants that? That doesn't sound fun. That can't possibly light any of us up. Yeah, I'm okay. Who was actually content with just an okay life? I sure hope it's not you, my friend, because you are capable and you are meant for so much more than that. And what if you continued not to do anything differently? What if you didn't take action? Where would you be in a month, in 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years? Where would you be in those timeframes if you didn't do anything differently? But then also think about it on the other side of the coin. Where would you be if you did take action and do something different? I hope that feels amazing to you. I hope just in asking that question in those two different ways, something came alive in you a little bit. I want you to show up for yourself and trust the process. Trust the transformation and relish in this opportunity. See it as a sign from your loved ones right now, however this resonates with you. Maybe this podcast episode came at the perfect time. Who knows? But staying in the same place is staying stagnant, and stagnant will never heal you. And again, it's not to be healed as if there's a timeline and that there's an ending to our healing journey. This is constant. But it's like the stagnant energy in the body. We have to move it around and ultimately out. So let's say you're waiting to get help or waiting to self-educate and explore all outlets like I did. But, whether it be a course or a mastermind, whatever it is, why are you waiting? If you find yourself waiting, why? Is it because there's maybe some uncertainty? Maybe you're afraid of the pain that you might feel? Or maybe you're just like, no, this is going to be painful. I don't want to rip off this Band-Aid. I don't want to go there. But notice I said pain that you might feel, because you don't know what's going to come up for you. It could surprise you. If it's pain, sure, there could absolutely be some pain. But what if there's joy for the first time in a long time? What if it's progress and hope and all of these unbelievable aha moments beyond your wildest dreams? That takes risk. That takes some brave steps. But let me tell you something. The quality of your life is determined by the amount of uncertainty that you are willing to step into. You have to expand your mind and energy and get uncomfortable. But I promise you, you will feel so much I can literally feel this right now, you guys. You feel so much bigger and lighter. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm actually like opening my chest up here a little more because I'm already just saying this, feeling that expansion. You're probably already uncomfortable in your grief to some extent, right? How could it really get worse? How could it actually get worse in not getting help and exploring some new avenues? I want you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable because that equals change. And there is peace and power on the other side of making that decision, making a decision to give this potential transformation, not potential transformation. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you will feel this transformation when you choose this new life ahead of you. and you choose to say a big hell yes to this and tell the universe, show me how good it can get. Seriously, I want you to open your arms. Again, I'm doing this on video here. Open your arms. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you want to, and ask for it. Put it out there. Show me how good it can get. What if you could be the happiest you'll ever get after losing someone you love? What if that is actually possible for you? What is that worth to you? And remember, it's not about getting over it. It's not about moving on. It's about moving forward. It's about growing around your grief and giving yourself grace as you do that and as you figure it all out, because that is exactly what this is. We're all just sitting here in our grief trying to figure out this freaking life. We're all really in the same boat in our own different ways. It's acknowledging that your loss is always going to be with you. But we can sit back and say, hello, old friend. Hey, grief. What's up? We're going to take some different steps now. Okay? We're going to do some things differently. And here we are, looking ahead, and we're going to take this first step now. We can't white knuckle and force our healing to happen. We can't be desperate to heal and desperate to move forward, because then we miss the most important steps to get there. If you are feeling this desperate energy and you're putting this desperate energy out there, we need to get rid of that and just be. Just be with yourself and your grief. To believe that as we're doing this, what is meant for you will find you. Again, maybe this episode is it. Maybe this is a catalyst into something bigger for you. I hope it is. I truly do. Because I've said this before, you become what you believe. So I'm challenging you now. Show yourself what you're capable of. I'm telling you guys, heavens will part when you do that. Maybe you literally believe in heaven, or maybe this is more of a figurative heaven. I'm not speculating here. But life is going to open up for you. It might not be right away, but listen, grief doesn't just evaporate. So what does that matter? It might not be one big, sexy, flashy change. All it is working on your mindset. It happens in the micro moments, not the macro moments. So all the more reason not to put pressure on ourselves here. Let's enjoy this process. That is where the aha moments come in, because we're giving them space to come to us. That's where the change and this phenomenal, otherworldly transformation can happen. And to live an intentional life after loss, we have to choose to make some waves. We have to do some big things and some small, meaningful things. We have to take some brave steps. We have to get out of our comfort zone, as I've been saying, out of the dis-ease, out of the familiar, and do something different. Many people stay stuck. Many people relish in the stuck. They have no belief in any of this progress or process or anything working, and they make excuses. But let me tell you, positive change, and I know this because I've been there, you guys, I feel so adamant about this. Positive change will never truly come if we live in this low vibrational, low frequency, lower brain thinking. Grief is a process, and it's often one that we feel like we have to do alone, or we even put ourselves in that position when we know there is help out there. Hi, that was me. I am guilty number one of this. Why do we do this? Because we tell ourselves it's not for us. It won't work. It's not in the budget. It's not the right time, whatever it is. But let me remind you, for probably the second or third time today, grief is for life. For life. Why would you put your mental health and your physical health and your general health on the back burner? Why give in to the overwhelm and the excuses and the it's not the right time? Let me ask you, when is it ever really going to be a good time? I want you to know I want to remind you again that you are the creator of your most vibrant, intentional, meaningful life. Myself, this podcast, me in this community, other resources surrounding you, we are just a conduit to help you get there. But this is your grief, and you are now the keeper of this incredible power of taking this next step in your life and creating something extraordinary with it. Really sit and think about that for a second. How incredible is that? What a gift that is amongst such devastation and chaos and loss and darkness, right? I want you to feel empowered right now. I want you to see and believe in that light with every fiber of your being. But I also want you to feel like you have people around you who see you, who hear you, who understand you, and can validate some of the things that you might be going through right now. There is little in our grief that we need more than that. Truly. And I say that because I've been there. There are often people that I am surrounded with. I have wonderful friends and family, but I never felt so seen and validated than I have with various Facebook groups that I've joined, or various communities, or literally you guys just on Instagram and starting Losses Become Gains and putting my story out there and having people just comment or DM me or email me or whatever. And they're like, thank you so much for saying that. Or, oh my gosh, I resonate with this so much. And then they tell their story and we find our people, we find our tribe. I mentioned briefly that in addition to grief coaching, I'm also a spiritual life coach, a soul purpose coach, kind of whatever you want to call it. But in that certification, we have not only coaching pods on a weekly basis, but we have groups that we work with and support groups, and those that we resonate with. You know, some of us just might be on a kind of in the same place in life or just sort of on the same wavelength. That has made this process what it is for me. That's why I use this as an example. The content is more valuable than I can describe. I have learned so much I can't even begin to tell you. But it's the sense of community and being surrounded by people who are also trying to serve and offer something incredible and beautiful to others that is by far the most inspiring part that made that investment worth it to me. So I say all this and use this as an example to say, you know, for us in our grief, who do we need? Well, we certainly don't need people telling us that, well, at least they had a good run. At least they're in a better place. At least they're with Jesus now. At least they're out of pain. At least you got to say goodbye. Not helpful. Not helpful, right? We need understanding. We need positivity. We need people who have or are walking the path that you are, who are perhaps in deep pain too, but are equally determined to live their best lives after loss. And they might not know how to get there. They might still be in a really dark place, but all they know is that they are choosing to live a better life for themselves. And that's all it is right now. Maybe that's all it looks like, but there's that willpower there. It's those who can walk this similar path to you so we can uplift each other as we do it. Those are the kind of people that we need around us. The people I've met in these certifications and these masterminds and things that I have done, that has what has really, truly changed things for me, in addition to all of the content that I've had the pleasure of absorbing in all of these things that I've done. And it's this higher brain, higher frequency, higher vibrational living that is going to change your life. I have been where you are. I know how beliefs about our grief can lead to this one negative thing after another. All of these thoughts over here is chaotic. But that lower brain, lower vibrational, lower frequency thinking, y'all, that ain't it. That is not what we're here for. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that that's not going to come up in our grief. Of course it is. And we have to acknowledge that. And we have to give that this space and time that it deserves too. But long term especially, I also know how that doesn't serve us. I know how living in that state is so detrimental, and how detrimental that can be on our psyche, especially if we're going through it alone, or we simply are not surrounded by the most positive influences or people that uplift and inspire and motivate us. Those people might not exist in our life, or they might not get it. They might not want it in the way that we do. There's a lot of people in my life that don't understand probably half of what I'm doing, or they're probably like, wow, she's changed a lot. Who does she think she is? Spiritual life coach. That's on them. That's not on me. I'm on my own path here. And it has opened up for me in ways I couldn't have imagined. But that was a choice. I had to want that for myself. And we have to want all of this enough to take that action. So I encourage you, go deeper. Get curious with your grief and with your life. Maybe you've really never thought about what you want, or maybe you just haven't since you've suffered whatever loss you have. One thing I want you to ponder here, this is really important, is what would it be like to go from just existing and surviving by a thread, or simply being okay with your life, to living your life, to thriving? I hope you can see the difference there. And if you don't think that's possible for you, or you're feeling whatever resistance you are, I want you to add yet to the end of that sentiment, whatever resistance you're feeling. I am not ready yet. I am not in a good mental place to do this yet. I don't know where to start yet. I am not capable yet. But I actually don't like this one very much, because you are actually so capable. The power is entirely within you, as I've said. And I want you to know right now, I want you to challenge yourself right now and ask yourself, where is that belief coming from? Where is that stemming from? It's a pretty powerful question. And you might not know, that's okay. But I want to plant the seed. I want you to those limiting beliefs, they all come from somewhere, right? Another one, I'm not over it. I'm not over this person's death. I'm not over the loss. First of all, whoever said we're going to be over it, like it's this hill we're magically climbing and getting over, and then, okay, we're all good, all hunky-dory in the world. No. So if you're like, I'm not over it, fine, I'll give you that for a second. I'm not over it yet. But again, you don't need to be over it. You'll probably never truly be over it. So I just want you to get that expectation out of your head right now. My point in saying all of this is there is so much power in yet. I always like to describe myself and my life really as sort of living more one-dimensionally before I went through the loss that I did. I had a beautiful life. I still have a beautiful life, but I had beautiful parents. I had a beautiful dog. I didn't want any of that to change. Oh my God, if I could go back, I still want them here. You know, I love that I've really discovered like what I want to do with my life. And I love this support that I can now provide people that I never would have been able to had I not gone through what I did. But point is, loss and grief, it forces you to see things differently. It adds complexity and layers to your life. There's an emptiness, for sure, but there's also so much soul and depth that we can tap into that people who don't know loss, or they've had a pretty chummy life so far, they do not have the ability to do that. That is a gift. Whether we want to realize that or admit that yet or not, that, my friend, is a gift. I am not saying it is a gift that our loved ones died. But what we can and should and will make of it, that is living fully and intentionally and with purpose with our pain. You have to wake up and make a choice to do that. It doesn't come easily. And it doesn't come easily to everyone, certainly. But if you are here listening to this right now, I'd venture to say that you are a person who can and has the will and determination to do so. I know that about you, especially if you've made it this far into this episode. So I want you to look inward and ask yourself, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to dig deeper and see what more life has to offer you? Because it is there. It is ready and waiting for you on a silver platter, whether you know it or not. And it's just waiting for you to open up and accept it. We can't expect it to be just thrown at us easily sometimes. We know that better than anybody if we've been through a loss, right? Life is going to make us work hard for things. But just when we think we're too lost, too far gone, too sad, too not ready, whatever the reason, that is when the magic happens. That is when things get good if we allow it to. We have to be open to that. So much of this process is within us, but so much of it, as I've mentioned, includes a community aspect and a way for us to come together and understand each other's journeys. And I'm telling you, I have learned just in my own self-education so much from other people and other people's perspectives. It's a beautiful thing. And as I was saying, you can have an amazing support system around you, generally speaking, but if it's not filled with the kind of supportive, uplifting people that you need around you, those who simply don't get it or have different viewpoints on how your grief should be handled, that's really hard, doesn't really help you, right? And when I started Losses Become Gains, it was always about the community. As I've mentioned, there's a blog, there's a podcast, there's everything I post on social media. But there is nothing that compares to the perfect balance of community and those tools and that education to serve you better. That's my bread and butter, if you will. And that is what has been most impactful for me in any certification or anything that I've done in the last year or two to better myself. It's this beautiful, magical combination of both of those things. Losses Become Gains started from very humble beginnings. It just came from a very heart-centered place of wanting to help as many fellow grievers as I could through my blog posts and talking about very real, raw, difficult subjects in the blog and on social media, right? I wanted to just help as many people as I could journey through the loss of their loved ones or any kind of secondary losses that come along with that. The reason I bring this up is because as I've gotten more inundated in the grief community and started receiving more feedback and getting more and more clients and comments on Facebook and Instagram and DMs in my mailbox and all the things, I realized there was such a need for a solid, supportive, reliable, relatable community at our disposal. One that combines being around other people who understand where you are, where you've been, what you're going through, and what lies ahead of you. That's a hard thing for people who don't understand loss or haven't been through it to really grasp, right? But also having some help from a grief coach in there, right? Again, to become a grief coach myself or to become a soul purpose coach, like we had guides in that program. Because let's be real, it might be helpful to have someone, it's helpful to have the community, but you got to have someone leading the charge and ushering you through this along in your journey a little bit in some capacity. And one who has not only been there and seen their own fair share of grief, I certainly have. Like I was saying, I was my own first student here, but took it a step further to actually go through the education of becoming someone who can actually coach and guide on this topic, on grief, in a really meaningful way. That meant something to me, to be able to offer grievers just like you well-rounded, well-educated, well-developed resources and tools and guidance and prompts and exercises that you could possibly ask for or need. But I also understand, being a griever myself, that it can be very overwhelming in the beginning. So that's important to me too. I wanted to present all of this to you in a way that isn't too overwhelming or making you feel like you are biting off more than you can chew too quickly when you might already be in a time of really intense mourning or grief. But there comes a time and this was very true for me personally, that I didn't want to continue feeling unfulfilled in multiple aspects of my life, let alone one that didn't have my parents and my beloved dog in it, right? Like, as if that was not miserable enough. I didn't want to continue choosing to put myself in a dark place. I was over it. I was getting restless and frustrated with my grief and the overwhelm of just trying to make sense of it all and just get from one day to another. So one day I kind of had to hard stop myself and say, that's it. No more. It's kind of this weird feeling, actually. It was like this feeling of like, okay, I sort of had to come to Jesus moment, but it was also very gradual at the same time. It's really hard to explain. Maybe you can relate to that. But moral of the story, I wanted to live in a way where I could laugh again and really mean it, where I'm not searching for something else because I am so confused and lost, having lost what I have. I hope that makes sense, because we are often searching. We often seek and look for other things or other people to help fill the void of what we've lost, whether or not we realize we're even doing it. I wanted to take my grief into my own hands, and I wanted to live in a way that I can honor my parents, honor their memory, because that's exactly what they would want me to do, but in a way that incorporates these massive losses into my life. I finally took my foot off the gas and feeling like I needed to conform to any other person's idea of what grief and that timeline should look like. I wanted to live on my own terms, so I started living on my own terms. And I want to encourage you that you can also live your life on your own terms, even when you feel like you can't. Even when you feel like you can't. When you feel like your grief and your losses and all of the complex emotions that come along with that are the ones that are steering the ship, and then you're just completely out of control and can't see a way out of it, that can be really scary, right? I really want to acknowledge that. That is not a fun place to be. But that's the thing. When we surrender to the process a little bit and understand that it is a process and that we can live intentionally and with purpose and meaning despite any hardship or adversity that has come our way in our lifetime, or will continue to come our way in our lifetime, because this is life, it's probably going to happen, right? That is where empowerment lives. That is intentionality at its finest. That is where joy and this beautiful sense of safety live. That's my offering and invitation to you. I also want to remind you once again that you become what you believe. So I invite you to show yourself what you're capable of. We talked about this earlier. What would it look like? What is that worth to you? To go from simply living here to your most confident, healing, optimistic, joyful self. What does that person look like now? Everything that we've talked about so far today, that's how I envisioned my intentional Life After Loss membership and community that I created. Guys, I didn't anticipate creating a membership and community when Losses Become Gains was first formed. I had zero expectations on what it would become, really. But now it's such a no-brainer, because the more I listened, the more feedback I've gotten, like I've said, the more people I've coached, this is what people need. This is how I envisioned all of this and how all of this came to life, so that together we could bring you back to life after your loss. I really hope that excites you, because that is such a beautiful vision that we can create for ourselves, that we can embody, that we can live in. That is the goal with intentional Life After Loss. It's to go into that deeper, more meaningful life, combining these beautiful tools and this amazing community that consistently allows you to work on your healing journey, particularly if you have experienced the death of a loved one and you are having difficulty living the day-to-day, living with your loss, understanding it, comprehending it, and discovering how to live instead of simply exist. It takes a community. It takes a tribe. It takes the right tools. It takes the right mindset. And it takes prioritizing you. It is everything we've talked about today. It's an aspect of post-traumatic growth. And that is a real thing. If you've never heard of it, by the way, post-traumatic growth, it happens typically when someone experiences a traumatic event that challenges their core beliefs. Let me tell you, I can't speak for you. I'll speak for myself. My core beliefs in life, were they challenged? They're still being challenged. But now I almost look at it as like in a fun way. I've gotten very curious about it. And I'm like, ooh, okay, let's go down this path and discover this next. This is really interesting. With post-traumatic growth, someone endures some form of psychological struggle and then ultimately finds a sense of personal growth. It's a process that takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and there is some struggle, 100%. But it is doable. This happens through education, emotional regulation, being able to articulate and communicate these things, which helps us then make sense of the trauma and turn those debilitating thoughts into more productive reflections on what has happened to us. Narrative development, which means producing an authentic narrative around and about the trauma and our lives afterward so that we can accept the chapters that have already been written, so to speak, and imagine crafting the next ones in a really meaningful and impactful way. And also, finally, another aspect of post-traumatic growth is service. People, this is a fact, you can look this up, people do better in the aftermath of trauma if they find work that benefits others. Themselves too, but mostly others. Period. That is growth. That is turning your pain into purpose, your losses into gains. And that is the core of this membership and community. I am here to help you integrate the lessons and practices that is shared through this monthly content into your life to make this work for you. And just in case you're curious, there are 4 main things that are provided and served to you each month in this membership, just so you have an idea if you're curious about this. There is, first and foremost, a live group coaching call and Q&A session. That is to ask me anything you want related to your grief journey, trauma, this healing journey. I love this too because, a question that you might ask or a topic that you might bring up can help others around you. Hi, this is one of the best things about a community. We are constantly learning and growing from each other. That is such a beautiful part of it. That is the most impactful part of this, really. But in addition to that, there's also a monthly digital download. So this might be a coping tool. This is an exercise that I create for you. This could be some prompts with some questions to get you thinking. I've already posed some questions for you today. So things along those lines. Again, just to keep you going, but manageable enough in a way that doesn't make it feel like this crazy homework assignment, right? That you have to do. It's very, very digestible and doable. You would also enjoy a piece of video or audio content. So this could look like an extra podcast episode, but usually it's a video where I'm speaking to you like this, or I'm presenting something to you, some topic that we might dive into that is related to grief or life after loss, whatever this is. And finally, we have a Facebook group. This is where this community aspect is really rounded out and we can all come together as fellow grievers and just support and uplift each other even further. And just a super easy way to do it. Love Facebook groups. They're like so easy. You can connect with people that you've never even thought you could connect with in life. It's so invigorating. I love it. That's it. It's not overcomplicated here because again, it's just about building around your pain. We can't overcomplicate that. We don't want to overcomplicate that. That is daunting and overwhelming enough. So really all it is it's just supporting you in a few different ways along a very complex, emotionally complicated journey with 1, a sense of community, 2, the perfect tools to help guide you. And, of course, we're addressing the core of our grief here, but there's so much more to the story. And hopefully you've gathered all of that today. in addition to our grief, to live this full and happy and intentional life. So I designed this really, I'm going to use the word intentionally. I designed this really purposefully with my grief coaching intertwined with this soul purpose coaching to create a really unique membership experience. I promise you, you've never seen anything like this because there's so many different ends of the spectrum here that we have to deal with in our grief. So on any given month, we're going to cover things like, of course, coping with grief and loss and hardship. Hi, number one. Managing anxiety and stress and fear, shifting your mindset, intentional and healthy living, wellness, self-care, somatics, all super important. Mind-body connection. This is so much more in depth than you could possibly imagine. Trust me, I've done the work. Tapping into your higher self, discovering your why, discovering your soul and your dharma, which you might be like, Tara, I don't know what the hell you're talking about with this right now. Don't worry about it. That's what you'll learn. That's all going to come. But either way, this is your invitation to go deeper, to get curious, to get excited about how wonderful life can be for you after loss. It's content and community and live coaching and this amazing Q&A call, which I'm so excited for, that speak to your soul and challenge you in your grief a little bit, just a little along the way, to make a really long-lasting impact on your emotional and physical well-being. It is finally feeling a semblance of hope and progress. I chose help. I chose to take action for myself and those around me. I wanted something more beautiful and fulfilling and impactful for myself, and I want that for you. That is exactly why I created this membership and community, because coping with our grief, it is a choice. Don't mistake that for a moment. I know it doesn't always feel that way. I know sometimes it feels like it's something we have to do. But let me be very clear, especially after a while, especially after the acute grief wears off a little bit, it is 1000% a choice. We can get stuck and we can stay stuck, or we can choose to put a hand out and ask for help. We can choose to take action and take small steps each day to understand it, to embrace it, to get curious about it, and to help ourselves along this very tumultuous journey. But it is not one that you have to do alone. That is what you are doing when you step into this membership. You will gain the ability to have a clearer view of your grief. You will find direction and a sense of belonging, and you are going to feel uplifted as you go through this process to live this intentional, full life. This membership is designed to take you to the next level and to find your gains from your losses once and for all, right? In a way that is impactful and educational and inspiring and just gets the wheels turning in this very griefy brain of yours. Again, I know how you feel. Now, if you're feeling some resistance to all of this, I feel you on that too. I've been there in that part of my journey. But if you are waiting to get some help or feeling like it's not the right time, or maybe this isn't it for you, I mean, listen, if you can carve out the time to listen to this podcast or any other podcast or indulge in any other self-healing activity, you can certainly integrate this membership and all it encompasses into your life. Because again, it gives you just enough each month not to overwhelm you, but there's impact. I want you to feel the impact right away so you can truly begin healing right away in a way that is going to feel more permanent. But it requires you to step into things that you might feel uncomfortable with. Maybe investing in yourself when you haven't before. But that's a beautiful and very exciting thing. Who knows? Maybe this is what you need. So I just want to empower you to lean into that and lean into that courage and reflect and ask yourself, what would it look like to invest that time into yourself? Knowing that as you go, you're becoming a brand new, changed human being. Pretty freaking cool, right? Like in just a matter of months from now, maybe even less, you could have a brand new life ahead of you. You could have a renewed sense of self, a renewed sense of life. What is that really worth to you? What monetary value, for example, really can you put on shifting your mindset to literally change the direction of your life? Where you won't be feeling those feelings of anxiety or overwhelm either at all, or it will lessen significantly, because you'll be living more peacefully and fully. And what if I can help solve that for you? I would be honored to do that for you. We want to rewire some of the beliefs and patterns that get us to this place of limiting beliefs. And not only that, but just to prevent our grief, on sort of a separate note, to prevent our grief from overcoming your life any further. It is a slippery slope, guys. You probably know this, or you've felt this before. So ask yourself, what are you willing to let go of? What limiting beliefs or thoughts are you willing to let go of that are no longer serving you? And what are you willing to give a huge hell yes to? In order to change, we have to do some hard things. But I see it for you. I see it for you. So I ask you, do you see it for yourself too? What would it take for you to focus on this and do this for you right now? You are not going to be the same person, whether you join my membership or not, by taking action and taking steps to really be intentionally thoughtful with our grief and learn about it and encompass it into our lives. You will not be the same person. And I want that for you, and I want you to be excited about that. But if you do choose to join this membership and go on this journey with me, we are exchanging this beautiful energy each month, and you're committing to the process. And there might be some hesitations at the beginning. There might be some hesitation later on. That's okay. Trust me, I have been there. In any course or class or certification that I've been to, that has ebbed and flowed for me for sure. But there is no way you'll ever be quite the same after making a commitment to a process like this. And that is a massively amazing thing when you really sit and think about that. So to bring up my very kind of masculine side here for a moment, I am inviting you to get some skin in the game. Okay? Take matters into your own hands. Allow me the incredible honor of guiding you along the way, because this is what I do best. This is what I am so freaking passionate about. I have clients that can back me up on this, and we're going to create some absolute freaking magic together, both as individuals and as a community. Okay? So that all being said, two things here. One, if you want more information on intentional life after loss, that can be all found in the show notes. It's on my website. If anything we talked about today resonated with you, you are going to want to check it out. Seriously, it is truly like nothing you have ever experienced before. I have no doubt about that. You're also welcome to just email me, hello@lossesbecomegains.com. Just so you know too, because I am so passionate about this, because this lights me up so much, and I am so determined to help you. I genuinely want to help you. I am also offering a complimentary 30-minute call if you are on the fence about whether this membership is right for you. If you're not sure, let's talk about it. I want you to feel sure and clear and confident if you choose to join us. But also, membership and community or not, I hope this, again, very jam-packed episode today gave you some in-depth insight into how to go about living fully and happily and intentionally after a loss. And you have a better idea of what this means and what this can look like and feel like for you. I have to remind you again, you are so beyond capable of it. You are capable of big, life-changing, beautiful things. And however I can help you get there, that's my job. That is what lights me up. That is what brings me joy. And I never thought any of this would be possible, truly, after the darkness that I've been through. So if nothing else today, I hope this planted some seeds in you. And I am just sending you a massive hug and lots of amazing energy today. And to close it all out, as always, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you in the next episode.